I am so excited. Today I'm going to be doing fall book recommendations. I love giving seasonal book recommendations, even if fall is definitely not my favorite season. I am mourning the fact that we're losing warm weather and that it's getting even slightly colder. I am such a spring summer girl, but I'm very happy for all of you who are excited about fall. And the thing that makes me more excited about fall is knowing that I'll be able to read cozy fall books. There are so many good books that just hit differently when the weather is cold. April from Getting Higo With It did a video recently where she did fall book recommendations based on your autumnal aesthetic. So I'm going to be organizing my video that way as well because I really liked that idea, and I'll link her video down below in case you want to watch that as well. But without further ado, let's get into the fall book recommendations. The first kind of fall aesthetic we're going to be focusing on is a dark, magical, kind of witchy fall. Think jewel tones and velvet and magic, crystals, darkness. I always think of like the whimsigoth 90s aesthetic. So there are a lot of like dark, twisted fairy tales in this section of book recommendations. First dark magical book recommendation that I have is one that I actually just recently added to my collection. This is Blanca and Roja. I found this at a used bookstore, and it's a book that I read a few years ago that I was so excited to be able to add to my collection. This book follows Blanca and Roja, who are sisters and rivals and complete opposites, but their family is cursed and has been cursed for generations. Their family is bound to this group of swans who live in the creepy enchanted forest near their house, and they know that one day the swans will pull them into a dangerous game that will leave one of them a girl and trap the other in the body of a swan. So every generation there are two sisters and one of them ends up being a swan. They don't know which one it's going to be and they don't know when it's going to happen. But the twist comes when two local boys become drawn into the game and the swan spell intertwines with the strange and unpredictable magic lacing the woods, and all four of their fates depend on facing truths that could either save or destroy them. I really loved the magical elements of this, the beautiful lyrical writing, and the creepy enchanted forest. The writing in this is so metaphorical that sometimes it's difficult to tell what is really happening and what is not, but I really liked the mood that created in this book. Overall, it feels really ethereal and mesmerizing, and I think really good for the fall time. A book that I just finished reading a few weeks ago is The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo, and I think that I would have enjoyed this even more if I had read it in a colder month. This is a historical fantasy that takes place in Spain during the Spanish Inquisition. We follow our main character Lucia, who is a scullion or a kitchen maid who has these inexplicable magical powers. Her powers have to do with like fixing things with her mind and moving things with her mind, kind of like a telekinesis, but she seems to have more power over creating matter as well. And she is entered in a competition to become the king's champion. So she's trying to showcase her powers against some people who have real magic, some people who are just performing illusions, while trying to assure everyone that her magic is really miraculous. It is from God. It is not evil magic, she promises. And I really enjoyed that discussion of like where that line is. What is a miracle? What is evil magic? And it's a balance that permeates a lot of the book. I really liked Lucia as a character. There was a romance in this book that I probably could have done without, but overall, again, I felt like the mood and the historical fantasy vibes are again really good for autumn. Another fairy tale retelling. This time I'm going to talk about Cruel Beauty by Rosamund Hodge. This is one of the more unique Beauty and the Beast retellings I've ever read. We follow our main character Nyx, who is actually tasked at the beginning of the book with killing the prince. Now the prince, the beast character, has cast some kind of evil spell on the kingdom so that everything is like dark and sad and desolate, and Nyx knows that if she goes and kills him that she'll be able to save the kingdom. But things become obviously more complicated when she arrives at the castle. I really liked Nyx as a main character because she is so like vicious and cutthroat and kind of mean. Definitely a cruel beauty, as the title may suggest, but she really has to like reevaluate her beliefs as she unravels the mysteries of the castle, because there were multiple people in the castle who could have been interpreted as the beast, as the villain, and seeing Nyx unravel that mystery I thought was really gratifying. And I liked that the world that she lives in seems to be inspired by Greek mythology. Again, not something that I'm used to for the Beauty and the Beast story, but I liked the way that gods and myths were tied into the plot. This book is really dark and moody, so yeah, that is Cruel Beauty. The horror romance Vampires of El Norte takes place during the Mexican-American War and follows our two main characters, Nena and Nestor. Years and years ago, they were best friends until a monster attacked them in the woods and Nestor believed Nena to be dead. Consumed by grief, he flees the village and never looks back, but little does he know that Nena actually survived, and she is really pissed off that Nestor left without saying goodbye. Flash forward in time, Nestor has returned. They're seeing each other for the the first time in so long, and it is so angsty and dramatic and wonderful. Now, I don't want to undercut necessarily that a large portion of this book is that there is a war going on and there are vampires attacking people. But to me, the thing that felt most important in the story was the dramatic, emotional, tense, angsty romance between Nena and Nestor. They both have to overcome a lot of pride and understandable miscommunication, and there's also a little bit of a forbidden element to their romance because Nena comes from a very, very wealthy family and Nestor does not. I read this book during July for Summerween, and if you're looking for a gothic, romantic horror that's a little lighter on the horror, a little heavier on the romance, I recommend Vampires of El Norte. Next is a book that has been popular for a long time, and I think that if you were going to read it, you probably have by now, but it just fits so perfectly into this aesthetic that I can't not talk about it, and that is Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. This book follows our main character, Bree, who is a high school student in a program for gifted students at a university, and her first night at this university, she witnesses an evil magical attack, a demon trying to feed off of magical energies, and she was not supposed to be able to see this, but because she did, she ends up falling into this magical secret society inspired by Arthurian legend. This book is fast-paced, immersive, dark, magical, layered. There's a mystery to be solved, a few mysteries to be solved actually, and a love triangle, which I really enjoy. The last book in this section is going to be A Monster Calls. This is a book that was very, very popular, I think, when it first came out, and I don't know if it has retained that popularity, so I would like it to resurge because this is one of the most stunning books that I have ever read. This book follows a young boy named Connor, and one night he's in his bedroom when this giant monster force of nature approaches the window and demands the truth, whatever that means. In the conversation between Connor and the monster is telling him multiple stories, and the stories are illustrated so stunningly, creating an overarching story of grief and healing that was both mesmerizing and thought-provoking. Okay, I'm going to reapply some lip gloss and move into the next category of aesthetic, cozy Meg Ryan fall. The fall time is the time for Nora Ephron movies. I mean, You've Got Mail, When Harry Met Sally, even Sleepless in Seattle, although to me that's a little bit more of a winter movie. But the cozy Meg Ryan vibe is what this next aesthetic is. When I think of a Meg Ryan fall, I think of a warm, inviting bookshop, lighting pumpkin-scented candles, putting on twinkle lights while watching Gilmore Girls in the background. These are going to be happy, cozy books. The first, I think, quintessential Meg Ryan fall book is Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. Divine Rivals I would pitch as a historical fantasy response to You've Got Mail. We follow two characters, Roman and Iris, who really can't stand each other in real life. Not like they hate each other, but they definitely have a rivalry at the newspaper that they work for. But what Iris doesn't know is that the person that she has been corresponding with, sending letters to on her magical typewriter, is Roman. I am such a sucker for letters in a love story. I think they're just like the height of romance, so the fact that that is such a large portion of this book I really, really enjoyed. And again, the dynamic between Roman and Iris reminded me of the dynamic between the characters in You've Got Mail, and the way that they kind of bicker in the beginning and then soften to one another as the book goes along. I will say that the You've Got Mail romantic stuff is mostly confined to the first half of the book, because as it goes on it becomes more focused on the dark fantasy and the war element of the book. There is a war going on where gods are fighting against one another, and Roman and Iris become like war reporters, but the whole story is really gripping and romantic, and the ending was so shocking. I did cry, so if that sounds like something you would like, I think you should definitely read Divine Rivals. One of the coziest, most heartwarming while still emotional books I think is Anxious People by Frederick Bachman. This is a really charming book about a group of 8 strangers at an apartment showing who end up kind of accidentally taken hostage by a failed bank robber. I know that sounds like a little bit of a weird setup, but it really sets the stage for these characters who never would have met one another to form these really interesting relationships and tell one another their stories. I loved how my opinions of some of the characters changed over the course of the book. I liked, again, how they softened to one another and how they like opened up to each other. It's a very sweet story, but it's also like laugh out loud funny, and there are lots of unexpected things that happen. It's sometimes quite emotional and kind of dark, but overall it's really heartwarming and uplifting. Now for a couple of romances, I think Ashley Poston romances are really good to read during the fall. I particularly really love The Dead Romantics, which follows a ghostwriter who can also see ghosts. Florence, the ghostwriter in question, actually has been hitting sort of a creative slump lately because she recently went through a really difficult breakup. She does not believe in love anymore, and so she's been having trouble meeting her deadline for submitting her next romance novel. And at the beginning of the book, she meets her new editor, who is this handsome, kind of grumpy man who she really butts heads with. You would think that a romance would blossom from there, but actually Florence's family suffers a tragedy and she has to go back home to the funeral home that her family runs to help plan a funeral. But she is shocked to find that that editor from the beginning of the book has followed her to her hometown because he was in an accident and he is now a ghost and she is the only person who can see him. I read this book during October of last year and I feel like it was the perfect time to read this story. A romance novel that takes place in and around a funeral home and a cemetery can really only be read during the fall. But besides the romance, which I did think was very sweet, I also enjoyed that this book had a lot of discussions about grief and death, particularly because the family works in the funeral industry. Another Ashley Poston romance I want to recommend is The 7-Year Slip. This book is very popular, so you might have already heard of it, but I think that its slightly magical elements make it a really good read for this time of year. We follow our main character Clementine, who inherits a magical apartment from her aunt, and this is a magical time traveling apartment, so sometimes when she walks inside, she is transported 7 years into the past. Now, 7 years in the past, there was a handsome tattooed chef living in this apartment, and Clementine and he sort of spark a romance that becomes complicated by the fact that they exist on different timelines and can't seem to find each other in real life outside of the apartment. Their romance is sweet and emotional, and like The Dead Romantics, there is a lot of discussion of grief in this book because Clementine is mourning the loss of the aunt who left her the apartment, and it is overall a very cozy romantic book to read during the fall. One of my favorite cozy middle grade fantasies is called The Girl Who Drank the Moon by Kelly Barnhill. This book is centered on a village that is so fearful of the witch living in the nearby woods that every year they will leave a baby in the woods as a sacrifice to this witch. Little do they know that this witch is a nice witch, kind of like a fairy tale cottage witch, and she is baffled by the fact that these people keep leaving their babies in the woods. So she feeds the babies a little bit of starlight and brings them to the village on the other side of the forest so that they can be adopted out to, she thinks, more kind and caring families who won't just abandon their children. One year, however, she accidentally feeds the abandoned baby moonlight instead of starlight, and that gives this child magical powers. So the witch names her Luna and adopts the child as her own. You follow Luna as she grows up, as she becomes friends with the swamp monster and dragons in the forest, and it's very whimsical and magical until that original village decides that they need to kill the witch who lives in the woods, and Luna has to protect this mother figure of hers. Like I said before, this book is just full of whimsy and wonder, and I highly recommend the audiobook to experience this story. For my final aesthetic, I'm going to call this category back to school because some of them fall into the dark academia sphere, but a few of the books are on the lighter side in that they don't involve quite as much like darkness and murder. But since the fall has always felt to me like back to school season, all of these books are going to take place either in a university or a high school or a middle school and will focus on going back to school in some way. First is In My Dreams I Hold a Knife. This actually follows a class reunion of a group of friends who in their last year of school had one of their group murdered, and now that they're all reunited, they're starting to wonder whether the person who was convicted for that murder was actually the real killer, and they're unraveling and opening up this long dead mystery. This book was dark and thrilling and full of twists and unlikable characters. The energy of this group of friends gave me very strong Gossip Girl vibes, so if you think that you would enjoy a murder mystery Gossip Girl story, I think you should read In My Dreams I Hold a Knife. A book that is very popular, I think for good reason, and one that I wish I would have read sooner. This book recently got a pretty good Netflix adaptation, and that is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. We follow our main character Pip, who is also trying to solve a mystery from years ago, this time for a school project. Popular, beautiful Andy Bell went missing, I think 5 years ago, and she's believed by everyone to have been murdered by her boyfriend Sal. But Pip thinks that there might be more to the story, so she teams up with Sal's younger brother Rob Ravi, and the two of them start an investigation that Pip is recording for a podcast. I will say that the podcast element was a really fun layer to this story because it made it so good to listen to on audio. There's a full cast of characters and sound effects, and it makes for a really immersive listening experience. And the story itself is just so thrilling and gripping. There are twists on twists on twists. I predicted a few things, but I was completely floored by other things, and I just cannot sing this book's praises enough. Next is Babel by R.F. Kuang. I think some people say Babel. I don't really know which is more correct, but I have always said Babel. But anyway, this is a historical fantasy which follows our main character Robin, enrolled in a very prestigious linguistics program at Oxford University. Now, the fantasy element comes into play with this very interesting magic system. It's called silverworking, and I'm going to refer to the Goodreads description so I make sure that I'm explaining it correctly, but it is the art of manifesting the meaning lost in translation using enchanted silver bars, and it has made the British unparalleled in power as the craft serves the empire's quest for colonization. My favorite thing about this book were its themes more so than its plot. There are discussions about the pursuit of knowledge and how that relates to colonialism and colonial resistance, particularly for a character like Robin, who feels like serving Babel and serving the university means betraying and exploiting his home country. Next, I get to talk about one of my favorite authors, and that is Ya Jessie. She only has 2 books out, but both of them are glowing 5-star books for me, and so if you have not read her books, I implore you to please read her books. The one I'm going to be talking about specifically today is Transcendent Kingdom. This book follows our main character Gifty, who is a 6th-year PhD candidate at Stanford University studying reward-seeking behavior in mice. She is particularly interested in the neural circuits of depression and addiction because her brother died of a heroin overdose and her mother is depressed and suicidal. Gifty is determined to discover the scientific basis for the suffering that she sees in her family, but even as she turns to the hard sciences to unlock the mystery of her family's losses, she finds herself hungering for her childhood faith and grappling with the evangelical church in which she was raised, whose promise of salvation remains as tantalizing as it is elusive. My favorite part of this book is the kind of push and pull between science and religion, and the fact that Gifty is trying to balance her very religious upbringing. Her mother was very, very Christian, with the fact that the community of her peers and friends that she has built in adulthood all kind of like scoff at religion or seem to look down on it. Transcendent Kingdom is so stunningly written, and I think this book is really underrated, so if it sounds like something that you would like, I definitely recommend. True Biz is a coming-of-age story set in a deaf school. We follow multiple different characters and the ways that their lives intertwine, but my favorite thing about this book is that it's interspersed with all of these little snippets about history and deaf culture and like diagrams explaining how to sign different things that I found to be so fascinating and so fun to learn about. The story focuses on lots of different characters and their relationships to like the political dynamics of the school, which is interesting to read about as well, and it's overall a very lovely school-focused novel that I think is good, particularly for September, but moving into the rest of fall as well. My final recommendation for today is going to be a middle grade novel called The Shape of Thunder by Jasmine Warga. This is a really sad book which focuses on a school shooting. We follow our 2 main characters, Cora and Quinn, 2 middle schoolers who last year were best friends until Cora's sister died in a school shooting at the hands of Quinn's brother. Over the past year, the 2 of them have both been grieving their siblings in different ways, Cora grieving the loss and death of her sister, and Quinn grieving the loss of the relationship with her brother and the knowledge that her brother could do something so terrible. But this year, Quinn has a plan. She is determined and convinced that she can figure out how to time travel and prevent the tragedy from ever happening. So the 2 of them are rekindling their friendship very hesitantly while also trying to find a way to turn back time. This book is really difficult and sad to read at times, but it's also so full of hope and healing. I think that that's one of my favorite things about middle grade novels generally, is that they can deal with really difficult topics in a way that infuses them with a lot of hope and light. So those are my book recommendations. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know down below what your favorite book to read for the fall is. If I mentioned it here, if you're interested in reading any of these books, I would really love to know. I also very quickly want to add in a reminder for my American friends to make sure that you're registered to vote, and make sure that you vote not only in the big presidential election that's coming up, but also in your state and local elections. So I'm gonna have a link down below so that you can click and make sure that you are registered to vote, because again, it is really, really important, especially this year. But yeah, I'll have that link down below. Other than that, that is the end of this video. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. Don't forget to like and subscribe and click the bell to be notified of the next time I post a video. I'm going to try to post as much as I can during the school year, but it might be a little bit more sporadic now that I'm back in school. So again, make sure that you have that bell clicked so that you know when I post a new video, and I will see you in the next one.